Did you know that over 3,000 Canadians are diagnosed with cancer every week? This news is disheartening because cancer not only affects individuals, but also their loved ones. The journey for those with cancer is demanding. Now, let's explore the role of food in cancer development. Certain foods are linked to an increased cancer risk, alongside genetics and lifestyle choices. Dietary choices also play a role in the development of cancer. Some foods contain cancer-causing chemicals or compounds, while others contribute to inflammation or cancer through different mechanisms. Staying informed about these foods and making wise dietary decisions is crucial to reduce the risk of this devastating illness. It's important to note that cancer can affect anyone, regardless of their health, so it's necessary to be mindful of our lifestyle choices and not consume anything without consideration. Eating a nutrient-rich diet not only improves overall well-being, but also lowers the risk of developing specific diseases, including cancer. Let's explore some foods known to cause cancer and why it's important to avoid them in your diet. Smoked foods. Smoked meats are beloved for their unique flavor. However, the smoking process involves the use of nitrates and nitrates, which are preservatives that prevent bacterial growth and prolong shelf life. While this may enhance food safety, high temperatures during cooking or smoking can cause chemical changes in these additives. Nitroso compounds, such as nitrosamines and nitrosamides, are formed when certain substances convert. These compounds are known to be carcinogenic, meaning they can cause cancer. Studies have found a connection between consuming foods containing nitroso compounds and an elevated risk of various types of cancer, especially gastrointestinal cancers like stomach and colorectal cancer. These compounds can disrupt the normal functioning of cells and DNA, ultimately leading to the formation of cancer cells. Additionally, these carcinogens pose health risks beyond cancer. Excessive consumption of smoked foods can cause stomach infections due to high levels of nitroso compounds that disrupt the balance of beneficial gut bacteria. These foods also tend to be high in sodium, which can lead to hypertension, stroke, and diabetes when consumed excessively. To mitigate these health risks, those who enjoy the taste of smoked foods should explore other options, like using alternative seasonings or marinades to enhance flavor. By making these choices, individuals can reduce their exposure to carcinogenic and nitroso compounds while making healthier dietary decisions. Please subscribe to the channel, and click on the bell so as not to miss new informative videos. Farm fish. Farm-raised fish have some drawbacks compared to their wild counterparts. One of the main concerns is the presence of contaminants and chemicals in their diet and environment, which can be harmful to human health. These fish are often fed an unnatural diet that includes a high proportion of corn or grain-based feed, which is different from what wild fish eat. This difference in diet can affect the nutritional composition of the fish, including essential nutrients like omega-3 fatty acids. Chemicals are commonly used in aquaculture to keep fish healthy. Specifically, pesticides are used to control sea lice in crowded farm environments. While these pesticides are important for preventing parasites, their use raises concerns about chemical residues in the fish. Moreover, farm-raised fish may be exposed to contaminants like heavy metals, PCBs, and other pollutants depending on farming practices and water sources. These contaminants can accumulate in the fish's flesh over time. The connection between farm-raised fish and cancer risk is due to the possibility of them containing harmful contaminants and chemicals. Consuming large quantities of these contaminants, such as PCBs and dioxins, over a long period of time can increase the risk of cancer because of their toxic and cancer-causing properties. Fried foods such as French fries, fried chicken, and donuts are linked to a higher risk of cancer. When foods are deep-fried at high temperatures, they can produce harmful compounds like acrylamide. Acrylamide increases the risk of ovarian, kidney, and pancreatic cancer. Fried foods are also high in unhealthy fats and calories, contributing to obesity and other health problems that increase the risk of cancer. To reduce your cancer risk, it is best to limit fried food consumption and choose healthier cooking methods like baking, grilling, or sautéing. These methods not only reduce exposure to harmful compounds, but also improve overall health and well-being. Sugar. Excessive sugar intake has been linked to an increased risk of cancer. This is because high sugar consumption can cause chronic inflammation and insulin resistance, which promote the growth and spread of cancer cells. A high sugar diet can contribute to obesity, as sugary drinks and foods are high in calories but low in nutrients and fiber. Obesity is a well-established risk factor for various cancers like breast, ovarian, and colorectal cancer. Sugar provides a direct source of energy for cancer cells, potentially promoting their growth. To reduce these risks, it's important to be mindful of sugar intake and choose a balanced diet with whole foods like fruits, vegetables, and whole grains. These natural sources of sugar also provide essential nutrients, antioxidants, and fiber, which can counteract the potential cancer-promoting effects of sugar. Hydrogenated oils. Hydrogenated oils, also known as trans fats, are a concerning dietary component due to their link to an increased risk of cancer. The process of hydrogenation, used to solidify liquid oils in processed foods, enhances texture and shelf life, but also creates trans fats. These trans fats promote chronic inflammation in the body, which is a known driver of cancer development. Trans fats have been found to raise levels of LDL cholesterol, which is considered to be bad cholesterol. Elevated LDL cholesterol is linked to an increased risk of various cancers, including breast and colorectal cancer. This type of cholesterol can cause oxidative stress and damage to cells, potentially aiding the development and advancement of cancer. Additionally, the consumption of trans fats may contribute to insulin resistance, a condition that reduces the body's sensitivity to insulin. High levels of insulin resulting from insulin resistance have been associated with uncontrolled growth of cancer cells. Metabolic disruption and the presence of trans fats in cell membranes can disrupt cell signaling and communication, possibly contributing to uncontrolled cell growth seen in cancer. To reduce your risk of cancer, avoid foods with hydrogenated oils and instead choose healthier options. Opt for foods with beneficial fats like olive oil, avocado, and nuts, which not only add flavor but also promote overall well-being. Popcorn. Microwave popcorn, a classic snack for movie nights, may not be the best choice due to its potential link to cancer. The problem lies in the packaging, as the bags are often lined with chemicals like perfluoroalkyls, PFO, and perfluoroten sulfonate, PFIF. These chemicals prevent oil from seeping through the packaging during microwaving, but they can also leach into the popcorn. This connection between microwave popcorn and cancer risk is concerning, as animal studies have shown an association between PFO and tumor development. Animal studies cannot directly determine the risks to human health. However, the findings of these studies raise valid concerns about the safety of regularly consuming microwave popcorn. Additionally, there are risks for individuals working in industries related to PFO, a production. Prolonged exposure to these chemicals can have adverse health effects, including an increased risk of prostate cancer. Considering these concerns, it may be wise to consider alternative snack options that do not carry the potential health risks associated with microwave popcorn while enjoying your favorite movies. Soda. Soda consumption has been linked to an increased risk of cancer. This is due to several factors, including the high sugar content in these beverages. Regularly consuming sugary drinks can lead to calorie overconsumption, weight gain, and obesity, all of which are established risk factors for cancer. Additionally, the insulin resistance caused by sugary drink consumption further contributes to the cancer risk. Therefore, it is important to reassess our soda consumption habits. High fructose corn syrup, commonly found in sodas, can make cells less responsive to insulin, leading to elevated insulin levels. This increase in insulin has been linked to the growth of cancer cells. The presence of chemicals like caramel color and 4-methylimidazole in soda is concerning, although the exact connection between these additives and cancer in humans is still being studied. The acidity of many sodas can contribute to dental erosion and raise the risk of oral cancers. Furthermore, the acidic environment produced in the stomach by consuming soda may also play a role in the development of stomach cancers. Regularly consuming soda can lead to choosing less healthy beverages, which can result in a decrease in essential nutrients needed for cancer prevention and overall health. To prevent this, it is wise to limit soda intake and choose alternatives such as water, unsweetened tea, or low-fat milk. Processed foods. Processed foods have compounds like nitrates and nitrites that increase the risk of stomach cancer and other cancers. They also have refined white flour that goes through a harmful refining process and contains harmful chemicals. These foods are also high in unhealthy fats, which contribute to the obesity epidemic. Processed foods are high in sugar and lack essential nutrients. They're designed to make us overeat by triggering pleasure centers in our brain. This leads to weight gain and health issues related to obesity. Additionally, processed foods contain various chemicals like preservatives, colorants, and flavor enhancers that can harm our well-being. White flour. Consuming foods made from refined white flour, like white bread and pasta, has been linked to an increased risk of various types of cancer, particularly colorectal cancer. This is because the intensive processing of white flour removes important nutrients and fiber, leading to inflammation and other health problems that can contribute to cancer development. White flour is frequently added to processed foods such as crackers, cookies, and cakes, further increasing the potential cancer risk. To lower your risk of cancer, it is recommended to choose whole grain alternatives like whole wheat bread and pasta. Whole grains retain their nutrients and fiber, which can help fight inflammation and promote overall health. Red meat such as beef, pork, and lamb, has been linked to an increased risk of colorectal, pancreatic, and prostate cancer due to its high levels of saturated fat. The saturated fat content in red meat can lead to inflammation, raising the risk of cancer. Additionally, red meat contains hemiiron, which can damage the colon lining and further increase the chances of colorectal cancer. To reduce your risk of cancer, limit your intake of red meat and choose leaner protein sources like fish, chicken, or plant-based alternatives such as beans and legumes. When consuming red meat, choose lean cuts and cook them using healthy methods like grilling or broiling. Avoid processed meats like bacon and sausage, as they have been linked to a higher cancer risk. We hope you found this video informative and helpful. I recommend watch these videos and don't forget to subscribe to the channel